Yes. Ujung sekali. I'll give you a call in 2 minutes, okay? Yeah. Okay.
Hi guys, welcome to round 6. Round 6, let's call upon the Prime Minister.
Unfortunately, society has a warped perception of what beauty or certain standings, social standings in society has. And most parts of society believe that certain features means that you're necessarily more beautiful, or you're more successful, or you're better in life. And we think that the harm is in that you allow for cosmetic surgeries that are intended to change racial features is that you legitimize the idea that having certain features means and being probably white or being a more superior race in that situation is something that you should change to. We think ultimately on side government, we believe that this debate is who best protects against racism. We believe that we don't want to acknowledge that certain races are more superior than others. We want to make sure that every race is appreciated for who they are. Before I move on to my 3 arguments for today, a few mechanisms, right? Number 1, we are against all surgeries that are intended, obviously, to change racial features. Things like double eyelid surgery, skin bleaching, or making your maybe like your nose bigger and things like that. But we think this is different from reconstructive surgeries. Things like burn victims or victims that are victims of certain disasters. We think that they are okay because it's necessary for them to move on. But we are also principally against any kind of cosmetic surgeries, if that's what they want to ask us, because we tell you that it is the same kind of perception that you think that someone else is more beautiful than you, or that person is necessarily a more dominant person in society. We are principally against that as well, but we don't think that's today's debate. 3 arguments for you today. Number 1, how this is the government's role in being consistent. Number 2, how it's a legitimate choice for these people who make these decisions. And number 3, how it enables race-based discrimination, and it goes against all previous efforts that we have been having before this. Because number 1, how governments have a role in being consistent. We think on the first level, governments always have to stick towards the lines and principles that they have already drawn out for themselves. Already, we already have things like anti-discrimination laws and anti-racism laws. For example, in the US, if you actually criminalize people that make fun of others based on their races. Racism is a social crime in many countries. States should always be consistent in acting on the basis of the existence of third-party harm. And in this situation, we think there are many third-party harms that I'm going to explain later on. But we also think it goes against all previous efforts before, when we allow for people to actively discriminate against themselves and allow for other people to discriminate against them, because they, in the virtue of making this decision, is actually heaping even more discrimination against themselves, which I will further elaborate later on. Idea of illegitimate choice, right? Because number 1, we think that the absence of our policy is the validation of illegitimate choices that are fundamentally made based on racist perceptions. This means that when they feel the need to alter their racial feature just because they believe that another race is necessarily higher or better than them, we think it's harmful when states allow for that to happen, and states allow for people to believe that there is another race that is better than them. We think that we need to make sure that we are not complicit in the abstention towards preventing these choices. But the second level is this. We think that it is never the individual's choice that wanted to. We think nowadays on a lot of social media, or people around them always make the decisions, always tell people that their racial appearances are so and so based on societal pressure and societal harms. We think, for example, people in the West, they continuously want to be tanner and dye their hair brunette because they believe that blonde is just being boring. Or people in Asia, they continuously want to have bigger eyes, right? And we see that always happening in Korea, where they always wanting to have more sharp noses. This is because girls or women, when they open magazines, they feel the need to change due to something else being better. And we think it's harmful when they accept to that. And we don't think it's a legitimate choice to begin with, because their rationality is no longer there when they're continuously being pressured by society around them. Similarly, because of societal perceptions that are always changing, we think that it's an illegitimate rationale of these people, because we think that governments need to meet halfway and tell you that how you look is not a problem and it wouldn't be there because of what the societal people think. But before my third level, yeah.
Okay, in America, black people have been discriminated in the past, and they choose to opt out from this discrimination when they can alter their appearances
Sure.
to look maybe whiter. What's your solution to the blacks?
We think that we, number one, we are slowly moving away from that, like how we're telling you that a lot of already laws exist. Allowing them to change that is even more harmful, and that's going to come out in my third argument, right? But continuing on my third level of my second argument, we tell you that moreover, when you allow certain people to make decisions and suddenly they get certain social standings or propagated into society, things like maybe probably better jobs and things like that are more beneficial for them, you affect the other people inside your race. And those race people that are inside your race that don't necessarily want to make that choice will end up making those choices, and they're coerced into making that choice just because they think that decision is better for them. But ultimately, it wasn't the decision that they would have made if they were never susceptible to these kinds of pressures. So ultimately, this proves how it's never rational. But even if these people get a short-term benefit out of making these decisions, we think in the long term, it's even more harmful and even more discriminatory towards themselves, because it's moving on into my third argument, how it enables race-based discrimination. Because we tell you that governments can never condone that race is a problem. When you ban this, it means that you tell them that they are fine the way they are. But when you allow them to do that, this is government actively telling you that, okay, we know that race is a problem, therefore you can change it wherever you want. We think that it's the government telling you that yes, your race is a problem and you should change it. It legitimizes the difference. No, I'm not taking anymore, because you legitimize and empower condemnation of other people against you. This is the government telling you that yes, being white necessarily is better, and therefore you should change it, or we should allow you the ability to change that. We think you exacerbate the harm because you allow for other people to discriminate against them. But the second level is this: when people ethically make those choices, they discriminate against themselves, Madam Chair, because they believe when they make those decisions to change, let's say, make my nose, that's why my own race is not good enough. So ultimately, that's a victimization of their own community, and that's even more harmful discrimination, because they tell everyone that I myself am not happy to be a black or to be a Chinese in this situation. But the third level is this: when you tell another race that they're more superior. So that's telling people like probably the whites that they are more superior. That's even more harmful, because whites will then begin to believe that yes, I am on a higher pedestal in society. I have the ability to discriminate anyone that's black or anyone that's Asian, because governments say that it's okay for you to change and become like me, because you being a certain race is particularly harmful. We think it's harmful because you affect people, not only themselves that are maybe a less dominant race in this current status quo, but you also affect people that they should be dominant under status quo. Ultimately, number one, you polarize people even further. But number two, you reinforce the perception that these people do not deserve job opportunities. They always should be bullied in this situation. You enhance the discrimination against them. Ultimately, we are the best people that are making sure that racism doesn't become worse.
This House thanks the Prime Minister and to call upon the Leader of Opposition.
Madam Chair, the problem that side government try to paint to you is not the actual problem that people are facing today. People nowadays, they do not change their racial features just because they want to look like another race. There are pressures that are actually doing them so. There are actually external factors that are forcing them so. Things such as racial discrimination, which side government actually says that it's already protected under status quo, they are still happening, and they are the main reasons why we need to protect these people who live in a community who still thinks that white supremacy is the main thing in today's debate. So we have to engage and we have to get back to reality. Let's face reality and say that let's consider the fact that there is racial supremacy and how both sides are going to settle it, all right? This is what side opposition is going to do to you. Number one, I'm going to give you two substantive. Number one, on how race-based discrimination is still very happening and how we're going to solve it. Number 2, on a post-racial future, which I'm going to explain to you. But before that, 3 salient points of rebuttal, all right? Number 1, they talk about how a government needs to be consistent because they are anti-discrimination laws, and this allowing them to actually change their racial features is a form of discrimination. No, we are not discriminating them based on their race. We already consider the fact that, look, they are already anti-discrimination laws, and we feel that that is not enough because under status quo, the blacks are still being preyed upon in places such as Bronx, in places such as the Brussels. We believe that these are the form of issues that we need to face nowadays. Black people, African Americans, they do not change their skin to be so just because they want to achieve a certain social status like what side government is proposing to do. They are doing it because of the pressure that people is putting onto them, the discrimination that people throw onto them just because they are white. And these are the things that they are not, sit down first, these are the things that they did not choose to be with. These are by the virtue of lottery of birth where they are actually born with these kind of traits. And why should they choose in the first? The fact that there are people who actually want to dye the hair blonde, who actually want to make the eyes look bigger. But at the end of the day, you must actually get down to their level, understand why are they doing so. It's because number 1, there are discrimination towards them, and we believe that in order to curb this discrimination that we are talking about, we should actually allow them to do the choice. Because the stance coming from side opposition is very clear, right? We believe that it is the right of the people to choose what they want to do as long as there is no third party harm, contrary to what they are saying and clashing directly with them, alright? Because as far as we are concerned about the right to actually choose what you're going to do, to choose what you actually look like, is based on you and your own only. We believe that as long as it's limited yourself, as long as it does not cause a community damage like what side government tries to paint to you, right? It is perfectly fine because at the end of the day, you are only if they are actually not see stop upon. Second rebuttal, all right, on how social media dictates societal perception towards a person, on how now people actually want to be blonde because social media thinks it's better to be blonde. Well, that's not true because these kind of people, they're actually rational calculus. They actually go through a long thinking of before actually choosing to actually go through the procedure. But even if we agree that there are certain level elements in there which are decided by societal pressure, you have to understand that this societal pressure dictates what reality is. Reality is that these kind of things are not acceptable. In reality, these kind of things are actually forcing them to do so. I believe that if doing so causes them to have a betterment of their life, doing so causes them to have a better quality of living, we will actually bite the bullet and say, yes, it's their right to do so. Third rebuttal, all right, how we are slowly moving away from racism. Racism is something we have to concede in today's debate that is still very apparent in countries such as United States of America, in countries such as UK, where hate crimes are so rampant that if you wear a turban, you will actually be stabbed without giving you a reason, right? These kind of places where you actually have no time to actually justify your action, to justify your race, where people just queue on site on actually what you are. We believe there is the legitimate right for these people to actually have a sense of security by actually altering their racial appearances so that they are better protected in the community and better accepted into the community itself. Before I move on to my,
So your way to solve discrimination is for the person to discriminate against himself and tell everyone that I don't like my race, therefore I'm changing it?
No, you have to understand, these are not the people that are saying that their race is bad. They understand that they have to, at the end of the day, stay true to their race. But when societal pressure, when the majority, when the environment that you're living in, they are discriminating against you, we have to allow these people a form of avenue to actually cause this discrimination to be reduced, right? And we believe that that form of reducing of discrimination only comes under our policy. Now let's move on to my first substantive on race-based discrimination. Number 1, on the first level, all right, on how does discrimination happen. Now let's see, discrimination happen because of a certain trait that you possess, for example, your gender, your race, or your religion. But when we talk about something as sensitive as race, it cannot be changed because let's face it, religion can be changed. Religion is a choice to make. And we do not see why under this kind of lottery of birth, as I've explained to you just now, you should actually pay the consequences because let's face it, racism is a root old problem that has never been extinguished in status quo. They are from what happened last time and they are still carrying now. Whites are still regarded as superior to blacks, and we do not see how by actually not allowing these people to actually change their facial appearance, we're going to solve it. Because I'm going to tell you, right, sometimes these hate crimes, like what I've told you, like Asians in Siberia where they actually killed on sight, the Muslims in UK where they actually change because they have Middle Eastern appearances. These are the thing or problems that we want to solve because we're not talking about reaching a consensus with the community and actually spreading the word. When you live in a society where it's highly prejudiced against a certain race, we believe that it is the right of these people to actually alter their appearances to actually stay safe, something that our side will want to contest on today. And let's talk about racial supremacy, okay? Something that side government, ideally in their utopia, says that does not exist. Well, in every society, in every country in the world itself, there is still racial supremacy present. We see that it is only fair for us to allow these people to opt out of something opt out of this kind of race that they're actually perceived to be minority. When these kind of people, they're actually subjected to hate because of their race, we believe that it's okay for us to actually allow them a way, allow them a solution to their problem by actually allowing them to change their facial appearances, because not all facial appearances, like what they say, are skin bleaching and stuff. Some can be as very simple as putting on a double eyelid, tanning your skin. These kind of things, they're essentially not harmful. You'll create them a better future. We do not see why sit down. We do not see why you actually cause harm, like what they are saying, the third party harm that they are trying to point, right? There is no such form of tangible harm coming from their side. Future generation, right? Actually, some kids, what are actually relocate to another country, they will be actually staying there and they will be actually paying the repercussion of what their parents are by virtue of their race, right? We believe that if the parents themselves, they want their kids to have a better future, it's okay for them to subject their children to actually this form of surgery to actually alter their racial appearances, because at the end of the day, the harms and benefits can be mitigated, because at the end of the day, we believe that if it allows these children to grow up in a safer environment, to actually have a very promising future, we will all, by all means, do with it. Second thing, right, on a post-racial future, we have to look at status quo where society itself is already very integrated. People are already allowed the freedom to change their hair color, to change what they wear, to actually change how they talk. Because let's face it, right, some white people, even though they do not alter external physical features, they still alter the way they speak, the way they actually act, the way they actually want to embrace the African American culture. So we see that since you already allow this form of things are happening, and since this essentially is a form of not agreeing to your own race, like what they are trying to paint to you, we do not see why you should not extend this to actually allow them to do something for the sake of their choice. Because let's, for example, in Japan itself, the Ganguru people, which are people who choose to be tan, there is no harm. Society is still actually okay with them, but these kind of people, they have the right. So that explains to you that even if there are no harm to this people from society, it is the right to actually do so, because at the end of the day, it does not infringe on the third party harm. And if side of government want to win to this debate, they have to show to us how by altering one's own appearance, they will actually encroach another person's right. Something that they have to prove to take to this debate.
This house stands the leader of opposition, Deputy Prime Minister, please.
A lot of contradictions in one speech itself. He told you his first argument that basically racial discrimination is the main external factor why people want to change their race. But if that's true, then his idea of birth lottery is self-defeating. Because the idea of birth lottery is this, that people didn't choose their own race and therefore should be able to change it as long as it's based on their own will. We think that the very fact that he said that the people change their race because of external force, because it's racial discrimination, only legitimizes the fact that he concedes that people change because of other people and the way they perceive that other race to be something more dominant, something more powerful, something that can be related to success, something that can be related to fame and wealth. We think those are the type of things which discriminate against your own race, which is something that we didn't stand for inside government. A few rebuttals towards his case. First, are not enough, but then that's a self-contradictory argument. Enough, their solution is to allow people of a certain race to cave in into that discrimination, to cave in into changing their own race, to legitimize all those forms of discrimination. Then he said, no, wait. Like, hey, these people wanted to allow an avenue to escape discrimination to begin with. That's why we allow it. But look, okay, we concede that it may work in the short term, that people can escape discrimination and it may possibly lead good lives. But what happens is you'll never foster social tolerance within that society itself. You'll never allow the differences to be tolerated. You never allow the differences to be connective within individuals. Because this is what happens. You make race something that's binary and something that individuals cannot relate with. Instead, when you are of a different color than I am, you are not agreeable with me, you are something that I should not tolerate. And that's harmful, because it may work in the short term, but in the long term, it just legitimizes further discrimination, and that community can never change its perception towards that race. No. Furthermore, he told you this, that the right to bodily autonomy when individuals can change their hair and stuff like that, right? We told you in Elijah's speech that it's not absolute, because there's so many harms, and the state always bans things when there are harms. What are the harms? She pointed out to you 4 harms. Number 1, how it's already an illegitimate choice, where it's a coerced and forced choice, where individuals have no support system to protect them against. Number 2, how it enables further race-based discrimination, something that they just dismissed totally by saying that it's an escape clause, which I already rebutted to begin with. But furthermore, thirdly, it's government themselves telling people that race is a problem, and that's especially harmful when people themselves think that race is something so intrinsically important to them. When the government says that your race is a problem to our society, that just because you're a darker skin tone than me, just because you have smaller eyes, you are no less better than individuals who have big eyes and the individuals who could potentially contribute better to the state. So these people then believe their own race isn't good enough, and further, the last harm is this, that a dominant race and a God-given mandate that I'm more powerful than you is going to be legitimized under their side. You legitimize that stereotype in society and the perception in society that all straight white males, all straight white females are going to be the most dominant and successful individuals in that society, because they never rebutted this idea that there's a dominant conception of what a dominant race is already in the society today, and it constantly perpetuates itself, and it's never going to change. No, this last argument on post-racial future, I'll take one of the rebuttals, just calm down, right? So post-racial future, right? We think this is good. We think that when people can see that there are different cultures and they want to adopt certain other cultures, it's fine. But the thing is, because that your race is defined by your skin color and not your culture, and that's what they are citing in under those situations. We believe that race is defined by everything: your culture, your skin color. We think that when you not only adopt your skin color, but can also adopt other people's culture and foster it within your own culture as well, and intertwine it, like we've seen in the past so many times, especially in India, where they constantly intertwine their cultures between different religions. We think it applies to race as well. When you intertwine cultures, that's when social tolerance can be fostered in society. That's when it's good for post-racial future under our side. We think this idea and example on Ganguro girls is a perfect example, right? It legitimizes that individuals who tan their skin in Japan believe that their own race in Japan is not something that they want to be agreeable with, and that's harmful when they believe that skin color define their race. Before I move on, yes.
Okay, in the same time, you say that there is an intertwine of culture, and at the same time also you say that this is discrimination against these black people. We're targeting these black people where they're not accepted by the community in the first place. What are the solutions?
Yeah.
We agree that we bite the bullet that at this point in time, the blacks may be discriminated, certain individuals who are less dominant society may be discriminated, but in the long term, at least, we can potentially lead to a better future where the younger generation, the future generation, may not be discriminated under our side. Your side remains stagnant where you allow individuals to be constantly pushed and beaten and abused into changing their own race, where they'll never be able to support their own race under those circumstances. That's especially harmful. 2 points coming from me, right? The harmful role of corporations, this is where I'll extend from Liza, and secondly, what's the harms to racial interaction. Firstly, the harmful role of corporations. Corporations now will perpetuate the idea that people should take up this to do so. How do they perpetuate it? A few ways. Firstly, they perpetuate it through the media, through advertisements. These things are extremely pervasive to the television, through the internet. They are very successful in appealing to particularly carnal emotions, which make these individuals react in the shortest space and time. They have to convince these individuals of that target race that they're not happy enough right now with their culture, they're not happy enough with their own race. That's the only reason why they'll opt into that surgery to begin with, when they believe their own race is crap, when they believe that another race is going to be so much more better, it's going to lead me to success. Society itself, like how to be white, its position of we perceive that white people are more likely to be successful people in society. That's why we debate like white men and not like Asian individuals. Those are the perceptions which we empower under their society, right? We think that they allow the media to stereotype individuals, and you will constantly perpetuate the desire for these target race to conform to that, and that's especially harmful. So what happens now? The harm is this, that changing your race now means you're conceding that people of your own race can never be as wealthy, can never be as successful as the people of that other race. And only when you change do we become successful. Constantly be coerced into changing their race into that dominant race. That's harmful. Lastly, on this idea of harms to social interaction, what happens to individuals who don't opt for this surgery? The act of one African American changing their skin color affects the whole African American community, because you empower and legitimize the races, and you confirm your status as the inferior race. You confirm that there's a hierarchy. You confirm that you're not good enough as another race. You reaffirm the races by saying that your taunting worked towards me, your abuse worked towards me, because now I've joined you on your side. And this is when the races will continue to target these African Americans and to change as racism under their side, and they'll never create tolerance. Sure, there's going to be harms on our side in the short term, but at least in the long term, we can laws already in place to foster social tolerance. And this is when the racists can also find consolidation under their side in the fact that the state tells people that race is no longer about mindset and culture, but about your very eye and skin color. This is when they destroy the idea that race is an important identity that individuals should protect, and you allow race to be only defined by the ideas of boundaries of physical appearances. And that's harmful under their side, where discrimination will always be empowered by racists. You'll never stop it.
This House thanks the Prime Minister, Deputy Leader of Opposition.
Madam Chair, the only form of discrimination coming from side government is them themselves and not us. We will prove to you why we are trying to mitigate the harms and the effects of this discrimination in the long run. Madam Chair, they concede to the fact that anti-discrimination laws are in place in status quo. Madam Chair, goes to you as well. How effective is this law? This law has not changed anything and has not mitigated the harms and effects of it. We on side opposition are trying to mitigate the harms and are trying to come to a consensus where people can opt out and they can be protected and secured under our paradigm. Right. We are pro anti-discrimination, Madam Chair. I will give you two substantives, which is self-actualization and bodily autonomy. Second, I will tell you we will not ban, and how we cannot ban, but we can improve on all these procedures that it can be safer for people. And third, about state intervention, Madam Chair. First, a couple of rebuttals, Madam Chair. Now, they said that we will never foster social interaction and social tolerance under our paradigm. Madam Chair, we see that is untrue and there's a misconception of my Leader of Opposition speech. Now, Madam Chair, we on our side, we said that we will foster social acceptance under our paradigm. Why do we say so? Because we see that this discrimination is not a floaty cloud of glory that they portrayed, Madam Chair. It is serious and it is a life and death situation that happens now in the United States and the United Kingdom, Madam Chair. My Leader of Opposition has already told you how to just shoot down people because of this racial perception that has been planted in their head from generations to generations. For example, in the United Kingdom, the blacks have always been seen as slavery, Madam Chair. In movies, you see that most of the criminals portrayed in movies are mostly blacks, Madam Chair. This is a form of conception planted by society in the recent times and has gone through decades and until now it has been there. Madam Chair, this is a form of security and protection we are trying to foster under our paradigm, and we say that if these people, these blacks, are afraid and they need a sense of security, the government should not deny that right for them to opt out and to change their appearance. This is a form of denial of right coming from side government. Before I move on to my points, yes.
Ma'am, how will people start, all the white people suddenly start loving or even tolerating black people, when black people just continuously becoming white and agreeing that white are the more superior race?
Madam Chair, I tell you, in the past years, the President of the United States of America was a white man. Now that he's a black man, do you think they love blacks even more? They do not. This discrimination still happens under status quo. So we see that by changing your color, it forms social acceptance. It forms a sense that the reduction of crime rates and killings will be there. We are trying to mitigate the effects to reach social tolerance and social peace that they preach about. However, under their paradigm, it will increase the length of time and more people will be killed under their paradigm, Madam Chair. We are trying to mitigate the harms under our paradigm, but we say that if people want to opt out and change their social appearance, it should be done because you are denying their right. Madam Chair, in America, no thank you, in America preaches equality in rights, Madam Chair. They are given the freedom of speech, freedom of expression, freedom to education and whatnot. We say we acknowledge this freedom of choice of people. Why not extend it to bodily autonomy, the right to choose how they look like, the right to choose how they perceive? Madam Chair, if you can turn your hair blonde or permit to look like Middle Eastern people, or maybe straighten your hair to look like Chinese Asians, we say why not extend it to your appearance, your skin, Madam Chair? We say that this is a form of denial of right. The government totally bans this form of procedures for changing your appearance. For example, Madam Chair, bodily dysmorphic disorder or dysomnia, they don't like a certain aspect of their lives, how they look like. This sort of dysomnia will prevent them from reaching catharsis, or it's a form of enlightenment which they feel satisfied with themselves, Madam Chair. We feel that these people will never be satisfied with the way they look. They will look. So therefore, they should be given the right to change their skin color and to change the way they look like. If they want to do double eyelids, Madam Chair, we allow it because we don't see the harms that they are trying to paint for you. We see that the harms they're trying to paint for you are all just philosophical words coming off from the side government. They're not tangible harms that give the right to the state to dictate the way these people choose. Now, Madam Chair, lifelong effects if you do not let these people a sense to let them have their right to choice, Madam Chair. We see that this prevents self-actualization and causes a deep satisfaction in the root of society, Madam Chair. These people now will feel angered, Madam Chair, that they are not given their rights and their rights are not respected, Madam Chair. If you can give the whites a lot of rights, and why not grant the blacks their right to self-actualize, Madam Chair? We see that this is a question that they need to answer, Madam Chair. Now, if, Madam Chair, cosmetic surgeries is not allowed, Madam Chair, we say that is not right because certain people, they want to look a different way and we say that is fine. A person is not conformed to the societal structures painted by society, Madam Chair. Just because you are Chinese, you're supposed to look this way. Just because We don't see that's right, Madam Chair, because a person is given the right to choose his own clothes. The state does not choose your clothes for you. The state does not tell you how to dress up. The state does not choose for you, Madam Chair. We see that this form of rights and availability and accessibility to these treatments should be made available to people who need it, Madam Chair. In this debate, we are talking about people who need it, and we are not talking about those under your paradigm. Now, Madam Chair, we see that this right is not a privilege, Madam Chair. It is not a privilege where we just have it, Madam Chair. A right is something that you want, and you should be able to get it because it is given to you in your first place. It is not put there just for show, Madam Chair, but it's given to you, so you have the right to exercise it, Madam Chair. Now, second point, by not banning, we will improve it, Madam Chair. It will make it safer, and a form of security will be instilled in people, Madam Chair. Government now is aware that many people will want to self-actualize, will want to do it, Madam Chair. Therefore, the government will channel, Madam Chair, this money, the state's money to the research and development for the improvement of these procedures, Madam Chair. A sense of security will be inbuilt within these people who want to do this, Madam Chair, because the government that champions for the rights of people to self-actualize recognizes their need, Madam Chair, and it caters to the well-being of people that the state of equality preaches, Madam Chair. Third, of state intervention. Now, the state can only intervene and dictate what you can or cannot do if there's a tangible harm, Madam Chair. We say there is no third-party discrimination. This is between the state and its citizens, Madam Chair. We say that the state cannot dictate what you believe in and what you want to do with your body that you have been given the right to, Madam Chair. So we see that for all those reasons, we allow, Madam Chair, a form of accessibility, availability of these mediums and these avenues to escape for these people, Madam Chair. We see that they have the right to exercise what they have been given to. Now, Madam Chair, what have I told you? I've told you on three points that self-actualization and bodily autonomy is a person, every individual's right. It is not a society right, it's not a societal right, but it is individually, if they want to do it, they can and should be allowed to do so, Madam Chair. We do not dictate their right. Second, by not banning, we can improve on all these procedures, Madam Chair, because the government now realizes and is aware of the needs of people who need to do it, Madam Chair, for a sense of security and protection, Madam Chair, and those who want to do it for their own reasons, Madam Chair. For all those reasons, we are very, very proud to oppose. Thank you.
This House stands to that leader of opposition, government.
Hold on,
The problem with side opposition is that they try to push for social acceptance without giving us any. Not all of the analysis that we had on how you validate the perception of dominance in white supremacists and how you validate the submission of, let's say, black minorities or Chinese minorities when you tell them that, yeah, even the blacks don't want to be black. Why should we bother with accepting them anyway when they can't accept themselves, right? They ignored our logic. They didn't provide us with any reason why this acceptance would come about. That's why they fall, right? They gave themselves a stupid burden. But let's take a look at two issues in this debate today. Firstly, is it a legitimate choice that the state should allow? And thirdly, what are the repercussions upon the different communities and corporations, right? But let's take a look though at this idea of a legitimate. The DLO told us that Obama was democratically elected by the US, but somehow there's a huge problem of racism there and they don't like him. There's a bit of a problem in your logic there. Democratically elected, the majority of them like him. The majority of people there, we must assume, are fine with, with black people, right? In which case, let's talk about the societies that they probably base their lives in, right? Places where we really, really hate blacks and we shoot them on sight. Maybe places like Detroit or something like that, right? Why is it not a legitimate choice? Because even the LO and the DLO themselves said, right, that sometimes these people make their choices because they feel insecure about themselves, because they have body dysmorphia, or because other people tell them that this is the only way you'll be successful, right? Which proves our point that this is an irrational choice that people cannot be allowed to make. It is already the state's duty, right? The reason why we put certain laws into place, like not allowing children to make certain decisions, when we recognize that people cannot make rational choices. this idea of how the government has to be consistent, right? Because considering that racism is a crime, right? When you value certain races as more, even in the workplace, right? Considering it's already a crime, the government has to be consistent in not being okay with anybody valuing these certain races more than the other, right? But the only response that we got from the DLO was that the government should only intervene when there's a lot of harms. They're ignoring the long-term harms as to the idea of racism, because you just it can stop because it's being validated time and time again when you see a black person becoming a white, or a Chinese person deciding to curl her hair, something like that, right? But like, let's take a look at more of why they're irrational, right? Because these are based on external factors, right? Racist perceptions that are forced upon them. Considering that she wanted to fight for bodily autonomy, we have to highlight, right, that autonomy is when a person chooses for themselves. These people aren't choosing for themselves, ma'am. They're allowing other people to choose for them. They're allowing society to choose for them, and that's something that we do not support. But even if they were choosing for themselves, there's a third-party harm, right, which Eliza and Evan both explained to you on how they influence other people, parts of their society, other people, when they tell them, hey, you should become a white as well, right, because it means that you get something that even side opposition sector on the other side. And when this kind of thing happens, this means that you inflict on the ability for other races to remain as the culture that they want, right? Because you have to understand, when the rest of your people that you look up to, leaders of your race, are changing, that kind of thing, it's very hard to stand on your own and say, hey, you know, I still want to be proud to be black, even if you tell me I'm going to be harmed like that, right? And it's very, very harmful. But then also, the DLO tried to tell us, right, that considering it's a right, it's not just a privilege that some should have. But is it really a privilege if this kind of cosmetic surgery is only something that only some people can access, right? Considering the fact that it's already so expensive, and that, you know, probably only the richest of a particular race could be able to take it, we don't think, therefore, that it's a right necessarily, right? It is a privilege, but it's not something that we're willing to allow for. But before that, yes.
Okay, in existing status quo, blacks have already been discriminated in terms of jobs and stuff like that. If they go through these kind of procedures that could enhance their social status, why not that?
Because the problem is not every single black can do that, right? We can't change every single black to become a white for this short-term benefit, when there's the long-term harm of every other black never being accepted ever again, right? Especially since these black people are telling other whites, I hate it too, go ahead and discriminate against them. But the idea was this, like, needed to protect them. But we think that therefore it is a failure of the state, right, if they cannot protect them properly in the workplace, and that the state should not be able to shirk it off and say, but hey, you had that option to change your race, why aren't you protecting yourself, right? We think that we cannot allow the state to do things like that, because we told you that the only change that can happen is like through things like grassroots levels, right? For example, even in America, they were really racist before. They were the people who loved slavery of the blacks, and now we have a black president, right, Obama, and this grassroots change needs to be something that the blacks fight for, or that racists fight for themselves, right? They need to fight for these things themselves, and they cannot do so if they do not maintain a united front, right? There is no support for a structure that looks as if it's going here and there and has no concrete views. But let's look at the second idea, right, on repercussions in the different communities. Because the DLO tried to push a harm of that these people would not be able to self-actualize without actually analyzing what it was in the first place. But our problem here is this: we don't want to validate the idea that you can only be happy in another race. We don't want people to think that, right? Their point in itself is stereotypical. Their point in itself is the very reason why we cannot allow people to do this, right? Because we already told you, you coerce other people into it. This is the third party harm, right? Because you confirm the racism, and even especially other people who are weaker in the mind, who may not necessarily have wanted to do so, when they see other people doing it, when their other friends come back and be like, hey, I'm so much better off, you should really do it, right? As I said earlier on, you harm everybody who doesn't even want this choice, because doing specific harm that Evan talked to you about, he told you that you cannot build tolerance society like side opposition, right? Because the fact of the matter is that now you tell people tolerance is not important, right? Everybody should just change to become white, and that's something that already these white supremacists want, right? So considering that now you tell them like this is okay, the state is okay with that, then you can't build this kind of thing. Because what is tolerance? It is a recognition of our differences and embracing of our differences, and embracing that these differences can coexist. That cannot happen inside opposition when they believe that the only solution for black people is to discard the differences and just join in with the very people who are bullying them. Submission to this bullying is not something that we want to support. But what is their idea on the repercussions, right? They told us that laws were not enough, right, and people will be really pressured. But we think then that's even worse, because then they discriminate against themselves, right? We have to embrace the things that we have in the differences, right? They only wanted to talk about blacks going white, but they really did ignore the idea of how you validate racism, like even by the other people towards these black communities. That's very harmful. It's something that you cannot mitigate in the future, especially if the state takes such a shaky stance that is not in line with the laws that they have today. It's very harmful if you go outside opposition. Thank you.
This House thanks government with, opposition with, please.
The perpetuations of discriminations in American society has already been lasting like forever. The perpetuation hasn't stopped until nowadays. Black people are still considered as a second-class citizen in America when they're facing discrimination in terms of getting jobs, when they're facing discrimination in terms of, being real. America advocates that everyone is of equal status, regardless of race, religion, or whatsoever. I'm going to make 2 rebuttals in my speech, and I'm going to talk about 3 issues. Firstly, on the issue of bodily autonomy. Secondly, on the issue of right. It's the harm inflicted upon the community. That's what they contended. And thirdly, before that, I want to clarify one thing. I think the third speaker brings in a new material regarding the cause, but never mind, I'm going to deal with that. I'll first respond to the argument about cause is that if we can help that tiny group of black people that have been discriminated in America and they opt to move out from that community, we're very happy to do so. Secondly, about the cost to do all this kind of procedure, right? We are there to bite the bullet and say that they are covered under Medicare and Medicaid itself. They can go and opt for this insurance and they have the money to do so. Even in the long term itself, in America, it's okay for it in the policy itself. So solve the problem of the cost. Okay, I'm going to move on to the first rebuttal quickly on the birth lottery that second speaker talked about. Madam Chair, you have to understand that not all black Americans are, happy with how they are born with, like their skin color or their eyes of their, the color of their eyes, because most of the time, this is not something that they can decide themselves. So because of this, if they are being discriminated, we say that if they have a right to opt out by going through all this procedure to create a social norm where they look similar with the white, where white is more acceptable to them. This is where we say integration also occur in our paradigm. Secondly, we say that if you really want to talk about the anti-discrimination law, we agree we have anti-discrimination law to protect against them. But we have to always look into the cost, like what you say. If every single time that a discrimination happens against a black people and they need to go to the court, I think, like what you say, not all black Americans can afford to go to take legal action. And then thirdly, we respond to the birth lottery. I think it's inconsistent from the second speaker, as I mentioned in my speech. If black people had already been discriminated so severely in American society, like in Detroit, 98% of the people there are black people, how do you inculcate integration of culture like white marrying blacks? I don't think that's going to happen in your paradigm anyway. No. Before that, I'll take one. Quick.
Sir, you have longer term harm on how you perpetuate this racism because you tell these people it's okay to be racist against even yourself.
Okay, you're gonna be more clear in my second issue. First, the first issue, bodily autonomy. Number one, they talk about coercion. We say no. Most of the time, if you go for surgery procedure, you sign a contract, and if there anything happen, you are not satisfied with the result, you can always take legal action on the side of the house. We contended. So it's a form of informed choice that this black community, if they choose to opt out and they wanted to go through this kind of procedure, it is an informed choice that they opt for. There is no sense of coercion happens on their side. We contended it is a form of self-actualization, and it's a form of individual liberty that is protected and is guaranteed under the notions of American society, where they advocate a lot of freedom, like freedom of expression. And I think this is a part of it. On the second issue, the right to alter appearance against the harm inflicted. The main contention from the side government is this: how it going to affect the community that is going to be forced later on to alter their appearance so that they can have a equal social status as the white. We see good. Why? Because firstly, you already had been discriminated, and then through this procedure, if it can encourage people to opt out from this community, and you can sort of and then they can integrate with the white, we say yes. Because why? In the long term, if black people are so on being forced to alter their appearance to integrate with the white, we say in the long term, white people also started to accept them. Why should black people right now have to change their appearance to integrate with us? I think something is wrong with the white people. I think at least we have a starting and an organic change that we are pushing for on our side to push for these white people to start to accept black people. I asked a lot of time in my POI what kind of solution that your side can provide for the black people. No, they don't have nothing at all to deal with. At least our side provide this kind of solution. I mean, at least some form of justice for them. Because, I mean, if they really come to America and they opt for a equality choice, I mean, lifestyle, I think they should live a better life. No, sit down. Okay, our side contention on the right to alter appearance is this. Even in the status quo, if one choose to change their appearance, they can opt for, I mean, change in terms of their clothes to look more confident, like changing fashion. Occupation if they are being discriminated in the workplace. It's a form of freedom of expression. So if we allow them to alter their appearances just because they feel that they're being discriminated so severely, why can't we extend this kind of right? I don't think there's any tangible harm, rather than they can opt out from the community that had been severely discriminated. Before that, I want to go to my third issue, Madam Chair. How do we best treat race? In America, except race is not something that is so ultimately important, because in America, regardless you are white, you are black, or you are in the middle like my skin color, you are considered as equal status. We don't believe that white people should be regarded as a privilege. So we say is this: if you don't allow that the black community to at least go for this kind of procedure, and it's not a form of coercion, we say that you are akin in locking them in Gaza Strip, like what's happening in Palestinian. Because they're locked there, they can't even opt out from the community that have been discriminated. So we say that this kind of social engineering enables at least the black people who go through this procedure to look the same. And it is hard to discriminate against the black people right now. Because why? We're creating a form of change, organic change. Let me give you an example in Malaysia. If one has a Chinese ethnicity and opt to become a Muslim in Malaysia, they can also consider, to become as a Malay in Malaysia. Because why? Race is not something absolute. We cannot consider, maybe because in the past, you have a collective group of people living together, speaking the same language. It doesn't mean that in the modern world, they can't opt out. Madam Chair, we're very proud to oppose.
Madam speech, firstly, I'll talk about 4 questions that we need to be answered at the end of this debate. Number 2, I'll talk about the points coming out from side opposition that we've contributed to you. And thirdly, we're talking to you. I'm going to tell you the 2 burners that we've proven that should be able to anchor us to this debate. But before that, let's move on to the 4 questions that needs to be answered in today's debate. Number 1, we need to ask ourselves, why is racial discrimination still happening? Because both sides concede to the fact that racial discrimination is the main reason why we need to have this debate. But at the end of the day, the one that is differing from both sides is how we are going to solve it. Side government wants an organic change, where he says that, look, through time people will change. But our side is the more realistic side. We believe that under the road to there, under the journey there, harm still happen. African Americans are still being discriminated upon, and in that meantime itself, on our journey there, why is it then harmful to actually allow these people a place of relief, to allow these people to change their race in order to escape the things before they are happening? Because we agree that the road there will take a long time. We believe the integration is slowly happening, but the journey, that is what we are concerned about. The amount of people that are still harmed under status quo, that is who we are trying to protect under our policy. For them altering their race, right? Both sides conflicted in this sense. They talk about how using it as a tool of success, but our side talk about using it as a tool of security. Their side talk about this kind of people actually changing their race to conform to society perceptions because they think that whites are always good. Well, we believe that if this kind of people, even if we agree with you that whites are the superior race in America, if these people, they can alter something about themselves to actually achieve this kind of social standing, if they can actually do it to actually make sure they have a better life, we do not see that white is principally wrong, because principally consistent is our side, where we say that if you already allow them the freedom to choose whatever they want, if you allow them the freedom to choose their religion, the freedom to choose their workplace, why not just allow them the freedom to actually choose a race if it actually can help you to have a better quality of life? Something that they don't understand. But let's look at reality, right? The main reason why people do it is security. For example, in places like I've painted to you, where you can actually be killed on sight based on your race, we believe that it is a legitimate reason for these people to use it as a form of security, to actually change their race, to prevent harm from happening to themselves, because under their paradigm, they actually promote this harm, they actually allow avenue for hate crimes to happen. Legitimate at the end of the day. We believe that why is this choice illegitimate? Because at the end of the day, it is your choice alone. Even though you may run this slippery slope argument that say that it will change society perception, we believe at the end of the day, the reason to change your race is yours and your own decision only. Why does one's decision can actually, why do you not allow this one person to achieve self-actualization just because they believe that it will actually cause harm to society? We believe that there is no such harm, because these kind of people, they're doing it for their own good, and we believe that if you allow people to better their life, you should allow them to actually alter their race. Fourth question, right? Whose side actually solves racism at the end of the day? Because on our side, we do not see why you should actually do not see why we should actually disregard this mechanism as a way to actually mitigate harm in the process there. Because let's face it, racism still happens even though we have a African American president. There is still hate crimes going on. Ku Klux Klan is still very active in America itself. Why is it that on our way to actually journey there, why can't we allow these people as a sort of relief, as a form of security, to alter their race? Because yes, we concede that there will be a superior race at the end of the day, but if it means that the black are actually adapting the white features, we don't see why this form of integration is bad in itself. Because at the end of the day, if there is cross-racial features, we believe that it promotes integration, something that our side is trying to fight for. So what are the points that we have proven to you today, right? 4 of that. Number 1, we talk about how race-based discrimination is the exact reason we need to use this to actually solve it. Number 2, I talk about how an integrated society where you actually allow the freedom to choose everything you want, and therefore you should extend this form of right to your race. Number 3, I talk about how it is a form of self-actualization, because race is a long-term harm. If you constantly live in denial of the thing that you cannot change your race, we believe that it will cause psychological harm to these kind of people. Fourthly, we believe that at the end of the day, this form of procedure is actually used as a tool for these people to better their life. So what are the burdens that we have proven to you? 2 very simple ones that we should understand at today's debate. Burden is to show that it is the right for these people to choose what's best for them without causing harm to others. And our second burden is actually security. We believe that it is our opposition's right to actually grant these people a right to security, a right from harm based on race-based discrimination. With that, go with side opposition.
Four reasons why side opposition lost today's debate. Firstly, they never solved their burden. Sure, in the reply speech, they said the burden was firstly to prove that right to body autonomy is okay, secondly to prove that right to security is okay. But what really was their burden in the whole case today? They wanted to solve racial intolerance in today's society. That's what their whole case was about, of how you allow people to escape this form of discrimination. But it never told you, no analysis whatsoever throughout the bench on how they can actually change perception on the ground. Nothing, right? So it was a self-defeating case, right? They said discrimination was extremely pervasive, but they never said how it would change by allowing people to opt for this surgery and conform to that discrimination. Nothing, no rebuttals towards our side when we brought up the response. They said that the well-enforced anti-discrimination law wasn't effective. So in that case, how would your policy, which allows people to join the race which is oppressing them, going to be effective if our anti-discrimination law itself, combined with the fact that we're banning this procedure, is not going to be effective, right? So the idea is this, right? We push a harm upon them, right? That the states will never have a burden to protect them further. When they always can have a way out when they say that you could have protect yourself by opting out and using that for surgery. That's how, using that surgery, right? That's how their side will never have, firstly, a societal mandate, and secondly, a government mandate to solve the social intolerance on the ground. They never feel their burden. Second reason why they lost today's debate, they ran self-defeating arguments, Madam Chair. The ideas of birth lottery and right to bodily autonomy is that people didn't choose their race, so that they should be allowed to choose now and change, but that decision must originate from you. But in the same breath, the LO conceded that in order to escape discrimination, in order to escape from the racist, you must allow this policy to happen. So which is it? Is it a choice which is organic, or is it a choice which is forced upon you by the racist and discrimination? If you really believe in the principle of right to bodily autonomy and right to right to birth and the idea of birth lottery, the idea is this: that it must originate from you, and there's no external force forcing that decision to be made from you. Their side never proved how the external force will be solved. Their side ran self-defeating arguments. But furthermore, you talk about security, right? And this is when I would be able to credit them further and buy their arguments if they said the anti-discrimination laws fail. But in the last 30 seconds of the whip speech, he said this, that there's no form of discrimination in America right now, quoting him verbatively. In that very same analysis, that means that the anti-discrimination laws currently is so good that there's a right to security, and the idea that there should be individuals on site is so stupid to begin with, so that will never happen under their side. Using their own arguments to defeat their own case was something. So third reason why they lost today's debate, they're extremely dismissive towards our harms. Okay, we'll give them credit, right, even though it's not really due, that they tried to tackle the idea of illegitimate choice. But even if there's a ideas, three big harms still left standing. They never tackled the idea of how they're hierarchy in race, that there's a white supremacist and there's an idea that's a dominant race which people should conform to. Secondly, they never argue to you how they're ever going to change discrimination on the ground, because their side validates that form of discrimination. They said it's an opt-out clause to discrimination, but never told you why that opt-out clause will lead to society itself opting out from discrimination at the end of the day. It's only an individual saving himself, not themselves. So the last idea, and which I brought to you in my speech, was how it harms racial interaction, how you allow corporations to constantly pervasively influence ideas of these target individuals on the ground, of this target race, and how you harm the racial interaction, and they are no longer legitimate, they're no longer and lesser of human beings in society today. That's harmful. But the fourth and final reason, and this is most important to this debate, they failed to protect all the stakeholders. They only wanted to help people who opt in, and we give them marginal credit that sure, people who opt in may have certain benefits to security at the end of the day if you manage to prove that. But what happens to people who don't opt into that surgery? African Americans who believe that I don't want to change my culture, you still allow discrimination to happen towards them. So it's a double standard in the government's terms of protection, right? Why should the government only protect and facilitate protection of one's discrimination against people who never opt into surgery, because they can say, people of your own race opt into this surgery, why don't you right now? And that's harmful. We don't want that intolerance to foster.
Please watch Laws shake hands and go back to the briefing now.